mean, today's the day that the news came out about the ASF. That's
Yeah.
been extended, so it's maybe worth. Do you have a pithy comment about that? Because it feels like after all of that, it's just keeping going.
Well, I do, and I put it on LinkedIn. So for anybody that's on LinkedIn, look me up, send me a connection request, whatever. Um, I'm very into LinkedIn at the minute. I think
What
I'm
what's your
missing out.
handle?
Scott Casson.
Yeah, but you're like on Twitter. You're down with the kids. You were like
Oh yeah,
getting
yeah, no, no,
adoption
yeah,
dad.
no. On there, you need to use your real name, don't you? So,
Yeah.
um, but I kind of find myself in this place yesterday when I saw because I got an email as well, so it must have gone out to everybody who's ever used the Adoption Support Fund,
Yeah.
like forever.
Ever.
And obviously, we don't live in the UK anymore. Well, specifically England because it applies to England only, doesn't it? But um, I got it and I went, oh, well, that's lovely because obviously it doesn't have a massive impact on me or my family anymore. And, everybody's 18 and over now and there's no EHCPs and all that sort of stuff. But this conversation has been happening every bloody time that the debate comes to an end.
Oh yeah.
And it doesn't matter what government. It was Tories, it was Tories and Lib Dems, and now it's Labour. Um, but what I find very interesting is it's not the governments that are deciding this stuff. Let's be honest. I mean, yes, they're tightening their belts and all
Well,
that sort of stuff, but it's the people in the ivory towers that are making these decisions, and some of
do you
them.
think?
Well, yeah, I do. I have to be honest. I think that the civil servants are the ones that are putting this stuff forward. I'm not saying that they've delayed it. What I'm saying is that they're the ones that are saying, well, we need to keep this, we need to keep that, we need to keep the next thing. And, I put it on LinkedIn. I used to represent Adoption UK at the DFE for like a trillion years when I worked there. And we had the same conversation about how can we make sure that it's a guaranteed fund for forever kind of thing. And they were looking at ways to be able to do that. And clearly they've either not looked at it that well or they've just not found a solution to it. But as governments go or as civil servants go, by now it's 10 years old this year.
No, I think you've got it wrong. I think you're as wrong
I'm
as
not, no,
big
no.
wrong Ron.
No, no. I'm not
No,
saying that
from a
I'm not saying that the government don't have a say in it, but what I'm saying is that the information that comes from the civil servants is what makes final decisions,
no,
right?
not that bit, not that bit. The thing I think you got wrong
Ben,
is, well,
explain
the
yourself, man.
right. Well, I would if you let me talk.
You asked my opinion. I'm
Hells,
giving you my opinion.
honestly, it's like being married to you. And but
No.
Mrs. Coates said, "You always interrupt me." I said, "Honestly, darling, if I didn't interrupt you, there'd be no gaps
You know,
to
shut
actually
up.
to right." Um, I hope she doesn't listen to that. No, my point was this, right? So
Mm,
I thought actually the challenge is that everything is subject to the spending review. That's everything. There's no exception to that. Uh, Defense, education, health, prisons, environment, everything is subject to the spending review.
fair.
But there's some things that, so for example, education, every year or every 3 years, depending on the spending reviews, it's subject to that review. And but what we know is that they will not stop education because they can't stop education, right? They just can't, full stop.
Mm,
But they could reduce the spending. So
mhm,
they, at the end of the spending review, they might go, well, you're going to get 100 billion, but you're only getting 90 billion.
mhm,
Fine, we get that. But we don't, it doesn't reach the headlines. But because we're subject to the same spending review, but there's always this question mark over will it be continued?
mhm,
And the conversations I've heard civil servants say as well, nothing's guaranteed,
mhm.
but they're not in a position to give a guarantee. But the
Fair.
frustration in this case is that historically there would have been an announcement months and months ago. I mean, I
Yeah.
remember it getting to the 1st of January one year and people going, ooh,
Mm.
it's getting a bit tetchy, and we're way beyond that.
Yeah, but
Way
I think
beyond
some of
that.
the conversations I had, and I can say this very openly now because it doesn't have an impact on me in any way, shape, or form. But I had some really interesting conversations in the DFE, and it wasn't about it coming out of a government pot, whether that be local or national or whatever. It was about kind of it being privately funded by whoever, I don't know. But that was kind of some of the stuff that they were looking at, and which would have, I mean again, like you say, no guarantees that it would continue forever. But if it was funded privately, um, I don't know, by some massive organization or whatever, then that. But that was
charitable trust sort of thing.
well, exactly.
Like
But that was a discussion years ago, but it's not moved on. And you're
I
right.
remember that
This every time it's comes up for renewal, can we say renewal? Because I guess that's what it is, isn't it?
effectively, yeah.
It's the same old story. I think that what's happened this time is that, and I saw the question asked raised in was it PQs? Is that what you call them?
Yeah, it was, yeah,
I'm,
Parliament.
I'm so used
Uh,
to Irish politics now, I have to remember what they're called.
oh,
Prime Minister's questions, PMQs.
yeah,
And Keir Starmer stood up and he didn't really give an answer. And I thought, like for for Labour of all the parties to be
yeah,
like, so elusive about it and set that kind of panic. However, what I will say is, and again, you can take this as it's meant to be. What I have found is so many organizations who provide these services are the ones that kind of were panicking, which says a lot
yeah,
about Seth. And in terms of their funding, and I get it, I get it. But again, those organizations should be looking at other funding and not depending on the SF as well, because
yeah,
that's, that could be potentially the end of a service that's really needed if you're going to depend on that kind of funding. So, and I'm talking about that from experience. I know this from our own organization. We have one kind of income stream that, if that was removed, we'd be screwed. So, that's why we're looking at other, we're constantly looking for other income streams. So, I just think that it's the ASF is until somebody turns around and says, okay, this is going to be written into statute that families who have adopted or look after through special guardianship, kinship, that they're always going to be supported in terms of therapeutic interventions up to, whatever, 5, 10 grand a year. Wouldn't that be lovely?
well,
Like you can't,
well,
you
yeah.
just can't depend on it. You can't depend, and that's such a shame. It's such a shame. But
Wow, I'm not sure I
it's
agree.
well, I, I mean, like I say, it doesn't impact us, but there is nothing like that here. There's nothing like that in
No,
Scotland. There's nothing like that
but
in Wales. There's nothing like that in Northern Ireland. They have different kind of things, but it's certainly not to that level.
my perspective is that it was only my understanding is that it was only ever going to be a temporary measure while we
Right.
upskilled regional adoption agencies and they took over the duty or the role,
Okay. Yeah.
and they
Obviously, you've
haven't.
got insight that I didn't have, but
Well,
then
not
that's
that,
you've got an MBE, so
yeah, and a CF.
well,
Let's anyway. Stop distracting me. Um, so,
I've got an
but
AMBII. What are you on
yeah,
about? I just don't use it. I choose not to use it.
well, that's your choice.
The first
Um,
person to email in to anfpodcast@gmail.com to tell me what AMBII means wins a prize.
Really? Well, and the email is a and f podcast at gmail.com.
Mhm.
Um, my feeling on the issue is that it is unsustainable because sooner or later it's subject to cuts. Someone would, maybe not this year or next year, but soon, or it'll get nibbled away, or it'll get
Yeah,
diluted. I mean, they are looking to increase it to beyond previously looked after children to also children in kinship, which is
yeah,
exactly right because it's the same
yeah,
cohort of children, just
yeah.
circumstantially different.
Mhm.
That actually we should have regional adoption agencies that should maybe be morphed into regional agencies for supporting children like the
Yeah,
PLAC,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
the adopted
yeah. A
and then
name
actually we
change
should
is
have
required. Yeah.
yeah, and we should have a skilled workforce. We should have a workforce. We should have services that we're not getting into these. Oh, I want some help. Someone has to come out, do an assessment. They do an assessment. They submit the assessment. They have to wait. Actually, within each service, with each in each region,
Mhm.
you have skilled and trained practitioners. You have clinical staff, and that they do the work themselves.
Yeah.
Because to be frank, none of this stuff is rocket science. There
No.
are specialist services out there, but actually, life story work, DDP,
Yeah, yeah.
NVR,
Hmm.
play therapy, blah, 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 blah. Go on and on and on. That is not something that you can't not qualify social workers in doing to
Absolutely.
do. So why don't we move to a bit where there's increased ring-fenced funding that goes into the local authority to do that in-house, which will save money.
Yeah. And I guess there's two things in that because we know that has been happening to an extent.
Adoption
because
East Midlands. I'm gonna
yes,
ring the bell
oh,
because
exactly,
they
yeah,
flagged it up, didn't they? Two
yeah.
years ago, we even talked about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know that's been happening. But then you're asking social workers to do on top of a caseload, do you know, so there's that element. You know, you're working what, 60 hours a week no, I'm
No
just saying
one's
like
working 60
that.
hours a week.
Okay, that's maybe I'm just using it as an
Sorry.
example. You're working 60
Yeah,
hours a week, 35 hours as your social work caseload, and then you're doing 25 hours a week,
but
doing something else.
no,
But no,
no, you wouldn't do that. You
yes,
would
yes, because
if there's
no,
money coming in, you would
yes,
increase people's caseload or
if that,
decrease their
yeah, but
caseload.
what I'm saying is how it is now, they can't do that. And you've also got the other side as well. If you've got an issue with your local authority or your regional adoption agency because they've treated you badly and you don't trust them, where do you go then? No, no, because we know
Well,
this happens. We know it happens. Oh,
well, it does happen, but that is going to
if I was
happen.
near you, I'd slap you for huffing and puffing at me.
Well, it feels to me like that, but it's like the what ifs, the what ifs, the what ifs. And I think, yes, there is a cohort of people who are very dissatisfied with the service they get from their local
Yeah,
authority, or their regional, their RAA,
yeah,
which is a bit different.
yeah.
I'm not sure that you were always going to have a cohort of people who are not happy because you're always going to have that. I mean, that's maybe, oh, that sounds really cynical. And we should aim high, right? We shouldn't
Yeah, of
accept
course
that,
it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but we understand that there'll always be, and I'll be frank, I meet parents who go, I'm having a terrible time with my local authority. I spend an hour talking to them. At the end of it, I go, I get it. I get why they're having a hard time because they're
Mm.
they're spiky individuals that are not maybe good at articulating, but that the onus should still be on the local authority as a social worker. Whether you're spiky or not, my job is to give you a good service.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I think that the sooner we get to a position where we build in sustainability, and I know I keep banging this drum, and maybe I'm the only person alive who's still read the Vision 2020, which came out of the RAAs, and it said there was these three pillars of adoption,
Yeah.
which was recruitment, support,
Mhm.
and training for staff.
Mhm.
And the
Yeah.
training for staff disappeared, just
Mhm.
disappeared.
Yeah.
And what you want is someone you don't want to have, right? My vision would be this, that you would say, you would ring up post-adoption support, someone would come out. Now they do an assessment and they go, I'll get back to you. It would be someone who went, well, you need a bit of life story work. Well, I can do that. What are you doing on Tuesday?
Mhm.
I'm like, we've just got to it. Because to be
Yeah.
honest, life story work, you
It's
know,
ongoing anyway. You shouldn't need an assessment for it.
yeah, and the life story, I mean, I'm going to get absolutely hammered down and people are going to send in angry emails. But my view on life story work is that actually it's not rocket science. And
Yeah. No.
you need to be, there's good life story work out there,
Yeah.
creative, really well trained professionals. But the majority of it should be within the wheelhouse of good quality social workers. So I have this mixed feeling about the ASF. To
Yeah,
your
we weren't going
listener,
to talk about this.
we weren't. I've not even got to the list yet.
Now,
I've got
now
high
he's gone
feelings.
red. He's holding
And
his
another
chest.
thing, and another thing. Maybe we should just cut out this snippet and just put it up on the Facebook page as a video.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Mixing it up, mixing it up.
Yeah, mixed up. Yeah. But do you know
Excellent.
what? Like, don't get me wrong, it's great that it's there for another year, but it needs a little bit longer in terms of commitment. So like you said, the spending review, when is that? What is that? Can we, it should be there until the next one kind of thing. But I think the way the finances are in the country at the minute, you can't really depend on them for too long, can you?
No, Scott, I'm gonna float something out there.
Go on.
Maybe we should ask if the minister will come on the podcast.
Oh my days.
I'll get into a better room than I am now, with my shirt hanging on the door.
Hmm.
You think
Toilet
we
roll.
should? We'll ask. Let's ask.
Yeah, let's ask.
Yeah,
Let's ask.
to get like a Labour view on where do they see adoption and fostering?
Yeah.
What is, because we've had what's his face? I mean, it is the kiss of death. No minister in the right mind comes on the
I was
podcast.
just going to say, are we looking for a new children's minister?
The curse of the podcast strikes again. Um,
Oh God.
yeah. How is your career going, Will? What's his face? What was he called?
I can't even remember his name.
No. Yeah, and the other one that went,
And he was genuinely lovely as well.
he
Oh, bless
was
him. But
fully
there you go.
functioning. Anyway, we were I'm going to circle the rag